not used to that at all here. Okay, members, we're now in public session, so at the request of Broadcasting and Recording Services, members and visitors in the public gallery are requested to ensure that for the duration of the meeting their mobile phones are turned off completely or switched to airplane safe or flight mode, depending on their device. It's not sufficient to just put your phone on silent mode, as this will maintain a level of interference with the broadcasting system. Item number 4 is the role and remuneration of elected local authority members. Today's meeting will involve engagement with Minister of State John Paul Phelan in relation to the role and remuneration of elected local authority members. On behalf of the committee, I would like to welcome Minister John Paul Phelan and his officials to the meeting today. Before we begin, I wish to draw your attention to the fact that by virtue of Section 172I of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of their evidence given to this committee. However, if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and you continue to so do, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that where possible you should not criticise nor make charges against any person, persons or entity by name or in such a way to make him, her or it identifiable. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the Houses or an official either by name or in such a way to make him or her identifiable. Just before we begin, members, if there is a vote called in the chamber, Senator Conway has agreed to take the chair to allow the meeting to continue, and as normal practice I normally take members of the committee first to engage with the ministers, and then it's on, as you indicate, I will take you. As there is a lot of people here today and we don't have much time, I'm going to limit each contribution to 2 minutes in the hope that we can get around again for the second time. Is that agreed? Thank you. I'd now like to call on Minister John Paul Phelan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for allowing me the opportunity. I'm not going to go through the speech as was delivered earlier on. I'm going to take it largely as read, but I'll refer to a few points in it. I want to acknowledge the presence of the representatives of the AILG and LAMA who are in the gallery, and indeed acknowledge the efforts that members of the Oireachtas have made in both highlighting the issue of councillor pay and remuneration as well as their interest in this interim report. I want to thank Ms Sarah Moorhead, Senior Counsel, for the work that she has done so far and the work that she will do over the next number of months in producing her full report. I also indeed should acknowledge the efforts of the officials in the section on local government in the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government. I also want to acknowledge the fact that from the start my colleague Minister Donoghue and his Department of Public Expenditure and Reform principally have been key stakeholders in this process in ensuring that Ms Moorhead was appointed and our terms of reference were agreed and that this review process has gotten underway. The report itself I suppose it's short as an interim report and deals with primarily the aspects of remuneration. As Ms Moorhead has outlined, a lot of her work over the coming months will be in reference to the role and function of elected members. And she has felt, as she has outlined in her report, that in order to put a precise figure on the remuneration package for councillors in the future, that she will have to do the core work in terms of the role and function of elected members. Notwithstanding that, however, she does give a pretty clear indication of her train of thought on the issue and an acceptance of the fact that the current system of councillor pay and remuneration in its fullest extent as regards allowances and expenses is highly in need of modernisation and of streamlining. And she indicates a number of areas that senators and TDs and councillors would have raised with me over recent times and indeed over the years in terms of looking at the full role that local authority members play and how that should be possibly connected in the future with the broader public sector, how we should look at the PRSI entitlements of councillors, particularly with reference to things like pensions and so on and so forth in the future. And I look forward to her full report in the spring. And I want to reiterate, and I've said it previously that it is the intention, as far as I'm concerned and the government is concerned, that her report will be acted upon. Because we have seen, and I know that members here will probably use this opportunity to highlight again, I'm acutely aware of the fact that a number of particularly younger people who have been elected to local authorities, but people at all stages in their lives, considering leaving because of the demands and pressures on time, and also the fact that they don't feel that they're suitably remunerated for the role that the valuable role that they perform. So I'll endeavour, Chair, to answer as many questions as I can from the members in the time allocated.
Thank you, Minister. So I'm going to take two members first. So I have Senator Boyne, then followed by Deputy O'Brien. So Victor.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. And first I want to welcome the Minister and his team, but I also want to welcome the councillors that are here in the public gallery and the representatives of the AILG and LAM and those who are tuning in, because I can tell you, Minister, there are many, many people tuning in live to this meeting. And why are they doing so? They're doing so because they have a broad expectation that you and this report was going to come with something more robust, more stronger and stronger recommendations. OK, that's not going to happen, clearly, from the script that you provided to the committee and from the report that was widely circulated about 3 o'clock today. And when that report was circulated, within minutes I received, and I know many other people here received, emails, texts and messages saying they were bitterly disappointed. And that's across the party. And that's not bitterly disappointed with you, but it's bitterly disappointed that after all the talk and all the expectation, they are not getting a proper remuneration. Let's put it correct here, because we have an opportunity to put it correct on the record of the House. Councillors were in seat of $17,000 a year before tax. And you pointed to it, and I want to reiterate it yet again, that we have young men and women, and older men and women, and from different backgrounds and different traditions, and of all parties, including your own, who said they can no longer go on. They cannot wait for another 6 months to decide what's the future. They cannot afford to pay out. It's costing them money. Councillors are telling us they're dipping into their housekeeping money. They're long, long hours. They do not feel valued with the work they do. And I think that in some way, when I looked at all the submissions that were made to Moorhead, I particularly was taken by the AILG. It was an excellent submission, and it made very, very clear recommendations. And then I read in this correspondence here today that there will be online surveys of county councillors. There's 949 councillors, and we're going to have further desktop studies. You know, and we're going to request formal submissions. And my department's response has been nearly finalised. You haven't even finalised your response according to this script that you provided here to the committee. And then there will be further in-depth online surveys of elected members. And then it goes on to say there'll be a survey of local authorities and management in relation to the structures of remuneration. And there'll be desktop studies, and technical consultants will discuss it. And it goes on and on and on in this vein of what we're going to do in the future. And I think it's a disappointment. And I want to reiterate, I don't say it about you because I don't doubt for one moment your personal commitment to councillors and local government. You were a councillor elected in 1999 like myself, and I've travelled many a road with you in terms of the council and your membership of the AILG and the General Council of County Councils before. So I don't doubt that. But I'm saying is what I would like, Minister, today is to put aside all of this and say, can you give us a commitment that in the spring this report will be fully published and implemented, because I think it has gone on for far, far too long, and I don't think we need to have another round of surveys and online surveys and another line of consultation when we've had all of this. Let's just get on with the work and deliver. And I'm going to say it, and I said it before, I believe the right sort of money that council should be earning is between 30 and 35,000. That is reasonable, and that is half of what senators are paid. And I do believe we need to recognise them, we need to pay them, and we need to acknowledge that they are at the front line of the delivery of local government services. Thank you.
Deputy O'Brien.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I'll be very brief because I know they want to come in. I suppose two introductory remarks and then just an appeal to the Minister. The first thing is I'm strongly of the view that most of us in this room are actually overpaid, certainly those of us that are TDs and senators, and I've long been of that view. I'm also a little bit concerned that people watching this might get the wrong impression that this is the single largest attendance we've had at this committee for a very, very long time. There's 4 times more people here than would normally be here, and I just don't want that to send out the wrong impression that because of the subject that we're discussing it's somehow more important than all of the other stuff that we discuss, because that's certainly not the case. I just want to put on the record. We have a real problem, and the Minister knows this. Councillors who are working full-time, many of them who are working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, get a gross pay of about €23,000. And if we want to keep the good councillors that are in the system, if we want to attract new councillors into the system, particularly, for example, if we want more women into the system, we have to try and tackle that bit of the overall pay issue in advance of the next local elections. Now, I don't know, certainly on reading the interim report, it doesn't look like that's going to be possible. So I suppose the one thing I'm saying to the Minister is if it's possible to break this issue up into two and deal with some of the more complex issues or some of the subsidiary payments after the local elections, but to send a very, very clear signal to people who are currently thinking about getting involved in local government, people who want to make a really good contribution to their local community, and people who have to make decisions about childcare, about paying for kids in school, about all of those things, that if we're only offering them at the top end, as a standard councillor grows €23,000 a year, they're not going to do the work. And if we could fix that bit and then come to the rest at a later stage, I think that would deal with the substantive problem. So I would just make that appeal to you. And again, just for people out there who mightn't know the full background to this, the remuneration for full-time councillors is at a level of pay that I wouldn't ask anybody to accept for a full-time job. So this isn't about us asking for significant pay for people who are already well paid. It's just about trying to address the fact that if we want the right people for the job, we have to give them a basic rate of pay that's adequate to the hours that they do.
I'm actually going to do two more members because there are more comments than questions. So, Fergus.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to welcome Minister here today. I can say I've been in politics a long time. When I started in 1974, it's not 1874, no, even though that was a very interesting year for local government. Actually, you didn't get paid at all. There was no money. That's actually true. And neither did you get any pay for going to actual subcommittees of the council. So I think, and there were very active and vibrant meetings then, as they are now. So I don't think people. It's not done for money. It's done because people mostly want to do it because they believe in improving their community. And the problem is, as time has gone on, the demands on the councillor, be it male or female, are huge. And particularly, I would say, family-friendly hours. There are very few family-friendly hours for any councillor who already has a job, because he has to go, he has to leave his family, he's out at night, he's going to public meetings, he's doing an awful lot of work. And I wouldn't measure a councillor's work even in the sum of whatever, 35,000. I don't believe, I honestly and truthfully don't believe that's adequate. Maybe there should be less councillors and they ought to be better paid. Now, I don't know if that's an option, and the studies that you're going to do, I don't know what happens in other countries because I'm not now involved in local government on the ground, but I would think it's actually a full-time job, Chairperson. I think it's actually a full-time job. So for you to do your work properly, to address the significant widespread community issues you have to address. So I would measure it higher than the sums have been measured here. But I would reduce the number of councillors, and I think you get a better deal. The public would get a better deal, and you know, and I think that's the honest to God truth. The other thing, and I note, Minister, later on we're talking about reforming local government structures and that. I think that the day of directly elected chairpersons is a very good idea, but I think the actual devolution of power to elected members, I think that's where it is. I think if you give them more power, but then they must also be more accountable, and I think that's a road to go down, because the sense of powerlessness when you're on a council and you don't have any real power at all, you're an echo chamber. There's no real grasp of issues. Now, sometimes councils don't wish to take that responsibility. Sometimes they're delighted that the manager will make the awkward or the unpopular decision. And I think councillors have to take the unpopular decisions. I think they should be paid for it. And I think I would agree that you do further study, and you can abridge your time to next spring or whatever. Because the problem is, Chairperson, we cannot get, and I appreciate this other people, you cannot get people to stand for election. People just won't go. They won't go to a council because it doesn't pay, because it's not family friendly, because they have no power. And that's at the heart of all of this. So I think this is an important discussion. I think it's commencing a debate. It's basically gone on for a long time. But, you know, I think the reality is that you cannot get, particularly females, to stand for women. We find very difficult to stand for local election because they have families. So men have children too. But we just, and I'm not trying to be sexist in my comment. I'm trying to not I'm trying to be honest and truthful at the same time. And I think to get the proper balance, that's what you need. And I would say you're starting on the road, and I welcome that. And I think, again, the last point I'll make is I don't know what happens in other countries, truthfully and honestly. But the point of going from meeting A to meeting B to meeting C to meeting D and travelling over and crisscrossing and all over is, I think it's a joke, to be honest, I think it's wrong,
Thanks, Fergus. Darragh?
Well, firstly, just to respond to something that was already said, I welcome the fact there's a large attendance here today. I value local democracy. I think people should, and I don't think anyone should take any inferences from the fact there's a large attendance. And I find it a strange comment to draw people's attention to that in a roundabout way. This is an issue that's been going on for quite some time. Most parties, and I say most parties, don't have the finances to be able to subvent councillors to allow them to be full-time, and my own party is one of those who don't subvent their councillors or give them extra pay or free offices to work from, and those who are of independent don't have those resources either. So I think in the context of councillors' pay, we would look at it at the majority of the 949 councillors, not all of them. I think, firstly, Minister, it's a pity we're not discussing the report itself. I think there's nothing really to discuss. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but there actually isn't. The final report will be published the end of Q1, and I was a councillor for 3 short years, but I can tell you from the work that I do in Dublin and across the country that the councillors and local government perform a really important part of our really important role in the workings of this country up and down. And I think the thing is, the perception that people have of councillors is that they are full-time. People think they are. The demands on them are full-time. It costs their careers, family life, there's sacrifices that are made. And it is interesting, I would like to ask a few questions, is that did the department track the number of retirements or early retirements that councillors have made? I'm aware of a number of councillors who aren't standing at the next election because of the pressures that they're put under. We're looking at trying to get, I saw your interview last week, I thought it was good, to be fair to you, about involving firstly more women in local politics and at a county council level, and new Irish communities and those from other ethnic backgrounds. But not that people go into this for pay, but they €17,000 a year is effectively what it is. 23,000 if you look at maybe the gross payments. The allowances, I think we should look at probably removing, having a proper salary, doing it that way. But it is an issue. If you want younger people, if you want a more diverse group, and I'm not being ageist, if you want a more diverse, representative group of people representing our communities at a local level, the current structures simply won't work. We'll see more and more people leaving. So what I want to ask, basically, you've said in your statement that you submitted, the work will proceed, and it's the intention that a final report is ready for submission by the end of Q1 2019. I want to ask firstly, will it be the end of Q1? Will you insist upon that? Will there be specific recommendations in the lines of that deal with remuneration, pay, working conditions, those type of things? After that, you say the final report will then be subject to discussion between your department and the Department of Public Expenditure Reform. Rightly so. How long is that going to take? Are you going to set a time frame, or are we going to leave that open-ended? I think we should be ambitious with this and look towards a conclusion of this process for the next term of new councillors after the 24th of May 2019. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks, Darragh. Minister?
Yeah. To start, I'll start at the end in relation to the specific questions that were asked by Deputy O'Brien. It is very much my intention that firstly it will finish, the report will be produced by the end of Q1, which is the end of March, and very much my intention, and it is my understanding, by the way, that there will be recommendations, whether it will be a series of options or just direct recommendations. But my absolute intention is that this new system will kick in with the new local authorities. Now, that does require extensive discussions with the public expenditure and reform in particular. And I would just say, in relation to Deputy O'Brien asked the first set of, or one of the earlier sets of questions, we have to be conscious when we have the discussion that there is a broader context of public sector pay. And part of the job that Ms Moorhead is doing and will do in particular over the next few months, is making the most robust case possible as to why councillors as a group should be paid more and better and differently to how they're paid now. And in order for us to have a successful conclusion to negotiations with the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, we need the strongest case we possibly can have. And that's the job that she's setting herself to do.
Let the Minister speak. It's very hard to hear with a lot of conversations going on. Sorry, Minister.
Some people have very loud whispers. Chair.
Minister.
As George Hamilton would say, danger here.
You're privileged right now, though.
Just asked to substitute another committee for 2 minutes, so
that's great.
No, Mark, I was blaming you. Carry on.
Go on anyway.
Can I just read, and this will be, has been a thread in the earlier questions and will come up later. This discussion that we're having about councillors' pay is in a broader context. I think there is an acceptance politically that the ad hoc situation that exists at present, which is the basic payment plus a series of allowances and expenses, needs reform, and that's why Sarah Moorhead was given the task to look at this. But the discussion takes place in a broader context of public sector pay. And if we are to make, and I want to make this argument in the spring of next year, that councillors should be paid on a more streamlined, clear-cut and better system than they are at present, and more than they are at present. That we need to be able to jump the hurdles of public sector pay discussions that deeper are heavily involved in almost all of the time. In relation to some other specific questions, Deputy O'Brien spoke about pity we're not discussing the report. I mean, this was always going to be the interim report, and I understand from discussions before I came in and my own email, as well as contributors here, that people would have expected there were some expectations that there would be a figure in the report. The clear indication, as I read it, and I've had no contact with Ms Moorhead since she was appointed to this position, is that she feels in order to put that figure, she has to do the background work. And that is deeply frustrating for councillors and all parties and independents and all sorts of groups are now thinking and looking about running in local elections, which is why it was important to get an interim report to give an indication, and this report is only an indication of the way that she is thinking and where the ultimate report will end up. And I would ask people here not to despair, never mind councillors who may be watching or elsewhere. It is absolutely the intention of government that what she produces will be implemented, and we need the strongest report possible to do that. In relation to Deputy O'Brien, he specifically spoke about public sector pay and councillors working full-time. We also have to be conscious of the fact, and this is mentioned in the interim report, that there are quite a lot of people in local government who have other jobs. It mightn't be full-time, it might be part-time. And it is a difficult proposition to try and see how we're going to marry, and this is Fergus O'Dowd's point, meetings, times and things like that. She has spoken in a report about other sort of softer supports for councillors. But one of the things that will be examined is the supports that will be available for people who are working in private business to get the time necessary to do the attendance at meetings and do the work of a councillor. Council chambers should be representative. That means more women. It means more. There's only 3 in the last general election or local election. 3 councillors elected who were born outside the state, despite the fact that 12% of the people live in the state. And we have very open voting regulations for local elections. Basically, everybody who is resident in the state and over the age of 18 has a vote in a local election. That isn't the case in many other countries. But part of making councils more representative isn't excluding people who have another job. Now that How we can marry those two is a difficult task, but that's part again of the task that she faces over the next few months. Deputy O'Dowd spoke about the family-friendly hours, spoke about reducing the number of councillors. We are already at the lower end internationally in terms of the number of councillors that we have, and a further reduction in local representation. There was a substantial change in advance of the last local elections. It would enable local authorities to be in a stronger position to pay councillors more, for sure. But I mean, I don't see much merit in having a huge ratio of population to councillors. The whole role of a councillor is to be as close to their community as they possibly can. But that shouldn't be a reason why we don't pay them correctly either. I'm not using that as an excuse. In fact, far from it. But I wouldn't be for reducing any more the level of councillors that we already have.
I might move on just to the next round because we're pressed for time. And
I just want to mention Victor was started. He expressed his disappointment. I can actually absolutely give you a commitment, Senator Bryan, that the report in the spring will be published, and it is absolutely my intention that it will be implemented, and we need the best report possible. And I want this change to kick in, and I had indicated this, I think, in the Shannon on discussion on councillor pay, that I want this to be the case for the new councils once they're elected in May of next year.
Thanks, Minister. Senator Murnaghan O'Connor.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach, and I want to welcome the Minister here and, of course, our colleagues, the councillors. I suppose, I think it is important that we represent the councillors today. Again, most of us here was a councillor. I was a councillor for 20 years, so I would exactly know the role of a councillor. And I think, Minister, I was a little bit disappointed with some of your remarks in the sense of a councillor, because you were a councillor, and you, before you became a minister, which, by the way, and you're in my own constituency, so I want to welcome that, but you would actually know. To me, the biggest issue here today is the role of a councillor. And until you actually get that right, it doesn't matter how many surveys you do. You can do 10 surveys, you can do 20 surveys, but until the role of the councillor and the way that they are playing a massive part in communities is addressed, I think this will actually not work. And that's my own opinion. I feel that councillors' roles, they're undermined. I feel unless we actually allow their role and give them that extra money, and what you said is true, most councillors have 2 jobs, and the reason they have 2 jobs is they can't afford to live on councillors' pay. But Minister, you shouldn't even have to look at this. You should be turning around and saying here today, a councillor's role, we should give back councillors more power. Half the power, or most of the power, that local authorities had was taken with the loss of our town councils, which was an absolute nightmare because all our funding got cut. We ended up with councillors then going to municipal meetings with no funding for town councils, which absolutely, I felt, had an absolutely detrimental effect on towns throughout the country. And I think unless you go back and look at this and say, how do we address this? We give a bigger increase to our councillors, which they deserve for the work they do, because it's 7 days a week. You're on call 24-hour, which we love, by the way. I can tell you all the councillors, the 949 councillors that are there for the love of it. But also, you need to look at giving them back the powers that was taken from them. And until you address that, it doesn't matter, I think, reports or surveys, it will not work. But if you look at even, and I was looking at when the abolishment...
just one vote being called in the
sorry, okay.
Can we just make a couple of points before we go to the vote?
Yeah, I just let
me finish this now, sorry.
Yeah.
When the town councils were abolished, there was a saving of 5 million with the 40% reduction of councillors. There was a 5 million saving. Now, first of all, as I said, you need to look at this. This boils down to funding, Minister, and I don't matter what anyone says, I firmly believe the reason the town council were abolished was because of funding. So what I'm asking you is, the 5 million that has been saved through the town councils and the 40% in reduction of councillors, because their workloads have trebled, can we not look at giving them back the proper money for the work that they are doing? And it's only appreciation of the work that they're doing and the workload, and give them back their powers. And if I can come back in again, that's where we're falling down. Thank you.
Thanks, Senator Martin.
Yeah, just a very quick couple of points before I go to the vote in the Shannon. Minister, this boils down to pounds, shillings and pence. And the way you respect people is by paying them well. And the old quintessential saying down my part of the world is, you pay peanuts, you end up getting monkeys. And that's what's going to happen eventually if we don't deal with this problem. And I'm very much of the view, and while I have the utmost respect for Miss Moorhead, whom I don't know or never met, this problem is very simple. And it can be dealt with very simply. It's about money, and it's about more money for people who are doing an incredibly hard job. The whole municipal district structure, which it came into existence in 2014 after the local elections, thwarted and elephant the work that was done by county councillors in this country. And unfortunately, your fellow countyman, Phil Hogan, substantially reduced the remuneration that they were receiving. So what I would like to see is the report published with recommendations for a substantial increase in salary. If people are working full-time at it, well, they'll pay the standard rate of tax on it. If it's a part-time job for some people who are working in the private sector, ultimately they will pay a higher rate of tax. So eventually an equilibrium is achieved anyway. And the final thing I'd like to say is that this has gone on so long that I think the least councillors should deserve is that whatever recommendations are made, that it would be backdated to when this discussions started, which is probably about 2 years ago at this stage, that it should be backdated. It was, and I just point out, and you'll know it yourself because you were a councillor at the time, when Noel Dempsey introduced the changes in 2002, they were backdated until the day after the 99 local elections. Now, I'm not looking for that. I'm just looking for whatever is decided to be backdated to the beginning of this discussion process, and when it became an issue, and when government accepted that it was an issue that needed to be dealt with. So I suppose what I'm saying in conclusion, and thank you for your indulgence, Caoirleach, is that there is precedent for backdating it, going back to 2002.
I just want to, your friend might be calling you from Brussels, Martin. Minister Hogan didn't reduce the remuneration of councillors.
No, sorry, the expenses, they were changed. He was the Minister for the Environment at the time.
He didn't reduce councillor pay.
And members, just we have to finish no later than a quarter to. Now, we've been lenient for 10 to, but we have a select committee that has to start no later than 6:01. So I'm asking for you, if you can be as brief as possible. Some members are going to 2:30. So, Mick.
Okay, I have 3 points to make. The first one is I will make an observation about the attendance at the meeting. I came in here a couple of weeks ago for a discussion on traveller accommodation. There were 4 members of the committee present. We're having a discussion this evening on potentially increasing pay for councillors, and there was 12 people in attendance when I came in the door. I think it does say a lot about priorities, and I don't think there's any surprise in the cynicism of ordinary people when they see stuff like that. I've no problem with 12 people being here, but let's have 12 people at all the important discussions that have to be held. Okay, I want to make a point about Class S self-employment for councillors. I want to talk about a councillor who is a full-time councillor, whose partner recently became unemployed. He applied for job seekers allowance. Because she was Class S, they took into account the full amount of her income in the assessment, whereas if she hadn't been in the S category, her income, half of it would have been taken into account. The result is that the partner, he lost out, the household lost out, to the tune of €188 per week. Over a month, over a year, that's a lot of money. So I'm not going to give a view as to whether councillors' pay should be increased or kept the same. I'll save that for another day. What I will say here is that councillors should not be discriminated against in that way, and that does need to be looked at. Final point is people who are councillors, who are working people, who have jobs, who work in the private sector, it's not unknown for them to have real difficulties from their employer in attending council meetings. That is not democratic, it's not right, and the blocks that private sector employers are putting on some councillors from attending meetings needs to be addressed as part of this review as well, in my opinion.
And can I just say, just for the record, I'm not having to go to Mick. It's not for us to judge why members are here or not here or in attendance, and this committee has always had an open door policy. Whether you're a member or not, you're most welcome at any time. It's not for us to judge why you're here or why you're not here. Senator Davitt.
Thank you. Yeah, I suppose, unfortunately, from a councillor's point of view, there has certainly been more achieved from this committee in relation to travellers and travellers' rights than there has been for councillors, unfortunately, from a councillor's point of view. I think councillors have been, in relation to pay, are being treated like second-class citizens. And I know, Minister, it's certainly not of your doing. The Minister has been very frank with all elected members. Again, with our own Fianna Fáil team, there certainly has been very frank in what he hopes to achieve. You have outlaid it to us in the Shannon on a number of occasions. I'm afraid the report, though, let you down slightly, Minister, because there was more specifics nearly in some of the talks you had in the Shannon than what has been outlined in the report. I appreciate that Ms Moorhead is not trying to hamstring herself and prove a case in relation to wages and pay and all the rest of it. But heretofore we had talked about matching with a grade 3 or a grade 4 civil servant. That is on record. It's not specific in this document. It's kicked to touch more so than ever. I think the savings from putting people first, Minister Hogan was mentioned here before, or our friend in Europe, a present Commissioner. I think that the savings from that accumulated from the town councils and county councils is approximately 25 to 30 million per annum, which is quite a significant figure. If we were to go from 17,500 at present for councillors and the 950 odd councillors, increase that by 10,000, which is bringing us towards that 30,000. I'm using very rough figures. You're looking at 9.5 million. Again, that being done, if we did that, we increased their pay. It's up to the councillors at that stage what tax or whatever else they fall into. That's their own kitty caboodle, and it is for everybody at that stage. But councillors would find a way to certainly their secretarial work, juggling around their second job, whatever else had to be done, pay the councillors and they will find a way to accommodate everything else. So a fair wage for fair work is all we're looking for, and I appreciate what you are trying to do, Minister.
Thank you, Senator. Deputy Castles.
Thank you very much, and to welcome the members of the AILG, LAMA and the councillors and thank them for their engagement of the submissions that they made, to thank Ms Sarah Moorhead for her interim report, and to thank the Minister for the work that he has given this and the attention. You're under pressure, so I'll condense my remarks, and there's no point rehashing everything that has been said, and I want to then go straight to the concluding remarks. Because I think if we're going to deal with the meat of the issue here tonight, if you look at the concluding remarks, and in fact the very last line talks about how it's going to be a very difficult task to reconcile positions and to do so without clearly defining a future way forward for local government as a whole. That in itself probably shines a light on the issues that are at play here. There's a lot of very genuine opinions being expressed here at committee in terms of the work the councillors do. I made my own submission on behalf of the Fianna Fáil party in terms of the work the councillors do. I've said this before to your committee. I know when I first joined the local authority in 1999 and spent 17 years there, the motivation for everyone doing it is the same, a commitment to your local community. In that time that I was a local councillor, I saw the role change drastically in the context of what you're expected to actually be able to grasp in terms of the legislation being passed by this House, the implementation of that, and being able to afford the time to read to a very in-depth analysis of what's expected of you as a local authority member. So you really can't, in terms of actually then reporting back by end of Q1, if you're going to make an adjudication on what an acceptable remuneration is, you then of course have to then delve into, as this report is doing, the actual extent of work being done, both in terms of research, both in terms of the role, and you can apply yourself as much or as little as you want, but you are expected to be at the beck and call. I think we also have to take into the context that local authority members now are subjected to a higher level of public discourse by the advent of social media than they ever were when myself and the Minister first became councillors as well, and I think that has to be taken cognizance of well. They are effectively part-time and they are subjected to a huge amount of maybe hostile public discourse as well, and that has to be taken into consideration. They're not full-time professional politicians as we are. But then, as I said, the concluding remarks make the point that, well, there is a debate here about whether they should be full-time or not full-time, and that isn't reconciled in any way when you come to the concluding remarks. That's a very difficult position, and I would like to, I've heard what the Minister said in terms of he's saying he will implement in full what comes back. His own impressions of that concluding remark, because I think that in itself is something that I'm sure he has thoughts on as well, and I'd like to hear his thoughts on that.
Thanks, Shane. Gerard.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm not a member of this committee. I make no apology for being here.
You're still very welcome.
Thank you, Chair. I'm here to represent those who are my electorate, just the same as any other politician, so I make no apology for being here. Minister, you need to make up your mind whether councillors are employees or not. If they're not employees, then we need to talk about the allowances that are paid to them, and we need to pay them the correct amount of money. The sort of figures that have been thrown around here today, 35,000, seems to me a reasonable sum. Deeper needs a rationale. Let me give you a rationale for Minister Donoghue. You want quality people looking after your party interests on the ground, then pay them the money and you'll get quality people. You also need to have a council that is accessible to all, and I mean single mothers, I mean people who are unemployed, I mean people who are of all ages. You need to have that. If you don't pay them, you're not going to get them. I want to finally deal with, because I do know you're under time, I could go through an awful lot of different things, but I want to deal with PRSI. I wrote the first report on Class K PRSI and delivered it here to the Education and Welfare Committee. I took your department to the High Court on PRSI Class K, and you capitulated immediately with the 5 councillors that I brought to the High Court, and they were given a reward. Now, you gave, last Minister Varadkar brought in Class S for councillors, and that was a good move, but it wasn't good enough, because think of those who are not in private employment and those who became unemployed after becoming councillors. I have a case on my table right now of a county councillor who went for optical benefit. He's been paying 4%, the same as anybody on Class A. Went for optical benefit last week for a miserable pair of glasses, and he was told, I'm sorry, you don't qualify because you've broken your PRSI record. You must move now to retrospectively recognise the 4% that was paid by every county councillor since they were elected. It is unjust, to say the least, and it is morally wrong in every way that you are denying people the same social welfare entitlements that anybody else who pays 4% gets. The issue of pensions brings me back to pay. If a councillor is not a servant and there is no servant-master relationship, then we need to decide what they are, and we need to ensure that they have a pension going forward. Nobody in this House will leave without a pension, however small that may be. Nobody will leave without a pension. But at the end of the day, we must look after those that we expect to represent people. The difference between me and a county councillor is I can go into a public toilet and come out without anybody stopping me and asking me, will I assist them with this problem or that problem. Being a county councillor, I've never been one. I don't know why so many of them actually do it, because we don't care about them, and when we don't care about them, the public see them there as to be used. So it's time we put them on an equal footing with everybody else in politics and looked after them. Chair, thank you very much for allowing me in.
Thank you, Gerard. Minister.
I'll start at the end again. You'll have to speak for yourself, Senator Crockwell, when you say we don't care about them. I have, and it's been outlined previously, been from the start acutely aware that councillors are not adequately remunerated. And I know that councillors around the country are probably fed up of listening to me saying it. But in order to change anything, you have to build a body of evidence as to why it should happen. And it might be transparently obvious to you, and indeed to me, but there are citizens and ratepayers and property taxpayers around the country who have to be convinced it's their money, not yours or mine, and I'm absolutely committed to changing the system. And I don't want. It's interesting looking at the report that Ms Moorhead identifies issues, and I don't know who the previous speakers were who mentioned it in relation to PRSI, and that you know, we have to. It's a clear anomaly. Mightn't be the right word, but. There is a discrepancy there at the moment where that Class S, and I acknowledge what you've done in the past, but we now must decide, and my preference, and to get to Deputy Castle's question, from the start in this process has been that politicians should not be deciding the pay of other politicians, that councillors should be linked to the public sector, and I'm sure ultimately that might be one of the proposals that comes out of this. I would expect what we're going to end up with is an options or, you know, different potential solutions. That's my preference, but I have given Sarah Moorhead the job. She is a very brilliant person and will be, and has already, her forensic skills are written all over this short but very succinct and very clear report. And she has identified, I would say to the members and to the other people who are not members here, but who are speaking, like, read the report and read it a few times, because sometimes on the first reading it's not obvious. The disappointment that I sense from councillors today is in the absence of a figure being put on it. But there are a lot of other clear indicators as to where she believes this issue should be resolved. And those are, I suppose, the trains of thought that she's going to pick up with their Secretariat over the course of the next few months. I also acknowledge the fact that her concluding remark, and there is a kind of a clash in the sense that, you know, is the role full-time? Is it part-time? How do we do what Deputy Barry has asked, and I raised it myself earlier, for people who are working in the private sector, who are having difficulties getting off work, which is why in our second last line in this report it would be fair to say that much of the engagement to date has not just concentrated on remuneration for councillors, but on support systems for them and how the executive can support them. That support systems for them is issues like how they get the time off work, how their employer won't be at the loss of it. And that may involve other measures in other government departments that we haven't mentioned, in terms of taxation in particular. That would be one option, I'm saying. I don't know what she's going to recommend, but it would be an obvious one that I've just thought about. Several senators have spoke against surveys. I'm not against surveys. I mean, it is important. Some councillors are more involved in the AILG and LAMA than others. And I don't disrespect I was an active member when I was there, but it is not and shouldn't be an issue. The submissions that were received from the AILG and LAMA were excellent. I read them several times and clear to the point, but equally to ask the councillors directly themselves, outside of the representative groups, is the right thing to do. In relation to Senator Murnane O'Connor, I agree with her argument that the role of the councillors is central, and that's what's contained in the interim report, that in order to come up with a final package you have to look at what powers and functions. The reality is, though, that town councils don't exist and are unlikely to exist in the short term. What I would say in regard to that, and my opposition to them, and there's been two different figures given. Senator Davitt said 25 million, you said 5 million in terms of savings. Fundamental issue, and it's unanswered by anyone that I've heard on this question: why should people in certain towns get 2 ballot papers and everyone else gets, in the rest of the country, gets 1? It's a basic question of democracy, as far as I'm concerned, that one person, one vote for local authorities. Now, whether the old system can be married in through the municipal district structure, which the AILG and LAMA broadly, as I understand it, support, I wouldn't be averse to doing that at all. And some of the devolved monies that were given, the grants that were given to the town councils, that they would be given directly to the municipal districts. I'm not against that at all. Also, in relation to Senator Davitt, he spoke about the report. It doesn't have specifics. I suppose I've indicated my own position on that. And reading between the lines of what I have in front of me, because the only communication I've had is the report as well, there's a clear indication from the Chair that in order to give specifics, we have to do a deeper delve. And I will be endeavouring, just to say to the members, to ensure that we get the report in March and that the new councils, that this kicks in for the new councils. So I want to thank members for their contribution, and I'll be back, I'm sure, on this issue.
Thank you, Minister. We're going to have to wrap up there. So can I thank the Minister and his officials for their attendance today and for all their members who are in attendance. This meeting is now adjourned. The next meeting will be the 6th of December at 9:30 of the Joint Committee, but the Select Committee will now move to Committee Room 1 to start the bill.